Go outside, and don't you dare come back until the streetlights come on. If you were a child growing up in the 1960s, you know exactly what that phrase means. Those weren't just words, they were the absolute law of the land. For us, that slamming screen door was the starting gun for a day of pure, unadulterated freedom. We lived in a world of high physical autonomy and intensely managed risk, a world that today's modern culture of helicopter parenting and digital tracking wouldn't even recognize, let alone tolerate. Back then, childhood was an analog adventure. We didn't have protective foam on the corners of our coffee tables, and we certainly didn't have parents monitoring our every footstep through a smartphone app. Instead, we had scraped knees, a vivid imagination, and a neighborhood that collectively kept a watchful but distant eye on us. Today, we are taking a long, leisurely stroll down memory lane. We are going to explore 13 incredibly strict parenting rules and childhood norms from the 1960s that were perfectly standard back then, but would absolutely be banned today. Number 1. The streetlight curfew. In the 1960s, the rule of the road was universally understood. After you finished your bowl of cereal on a Saturday morning, the screen door slammed behind you, and you were expected to disappear. You might come back for a quick bologna sandwich at noon, but otherwise, your parents didn't want to see you until the sun went down. Parents didn't have digital pings or GPS trackers. They relied on two things: an informal neighborhood network of mothers looking out their kitchen windows and the setting sun. Do you remember the feeling of absolute, intoxicating sovereignty? You could be miles away from your front door, crossing the muddy creek behind the school, or exploring the skeletal framing of the new housing construction site 3 blocks over. You were the master of your own geography. And yet, you possessed an incredible internal clock. You knew exactly when 5:30 p.m. arrived, because the shadows stretched long across the pavement, the air began to cool, and the crickets started their evening song. And then there was the panic. When that street lamp at the corner flickered, buzzed with that distinct electric hum, and finally cast its pale yellow glow on the asphalt, you knew you had about 3 minutes to be standing on your front porch, or there would be severe consequences. It was the original curfew, and it taught us a profound sense of time, responsibility, and how to navigate the world on our own 2 feet. Number 2. The way back and unrestrained car travel. If there is one thing that shocks modern parents more than anything else, it's how we traveled in the family automobile. In the 1960s, car safety was a mere suggestion, if it was considered at all. Seatbelts? Well, if your car even had them, they were usually permanently shoved deep down into the crevices of the vinyl bench seat. For kids, the ultimate luxury wasn't a DVD player in the headrest, it was claiming the way back of the station wagon. Remember the sheer joy, and the slight nausea, of rolling around in that massive, unpadded cargo area? Whenever Dad took a sharp turn, you and your siblings would slide across the slippery vinyl, crashing into the groceries and each other. If you weren't in the way back, you might be lying completely flat on the rear window deck of the Chevy, staring up at the stars as the warm hum of the engine carried you home from Grandma's house. Or you were sitting squarely on your mother's lap in the front passenger seat, functioning as the family's human airbag while breathing in the fumes of leaded gasoline and unfiltered cigarette smoke. It was a chaotic, tumbling way to travel, but to us, it just felt like flying. I want to hear from you in the comments right now. What was your absolute favorite spot to sit in the family car? Were you a dedicated way-back traveler playing license plate games? Or did you sit up front on a parent's lap to help steer? Let me know your family road trip memories down below. Number 3. The Corner Store Courier. Here is the answer to our open loop from the beginning of the video. Today, if a parent sent a 7-year-old child to the store to buy tobacco and alcohol, it would be front-page news. But in the 1960s, it was just another Tuesday afternoon chore. It was incredibly common practice for your mother or father to hand you a signed piece of paper some loose change, and send you down to the local corner store. Do you remember clutching that note like it was a top-secret government document? You'd walk through the door, hear the little bell ring, and smell that distinct mixture of floor wax, old wood, and fresh newspapers. You'd step right up to the counter, barely tall enough to see over the cash register, and hand the note to the shopkeeper. He wouldn't even blink. He'd read the note, reach behind the counter, and hand you a pack of unfiltered Pall Malls or Luckies, and maybe a six-pack of Schlitz beer for your dad. You felt incredibly adult, entrusted with such an important mission. And the best part? The shopkeeper almost always let you keep the change, which meant you walked out with a brown paper bag full of penny candy, wax lips, and bazooka bubblegum. It was an era of profound, unquestioned trust between parents, children, and the neighborhood grocer. Number 4. Scorched skin and playgrounds of steel. Modern playgrounds are colorful, rounded, and covered in inches of soft, bouncy rubber mulch. But the playgrounds of the 1960s, they were built for pure durability, not for safety. They were architectural monuments of galvanized steel, concrete, and hard-packed earth. Everything was heavy, unpainted metal. Do you remember the searing second-degree heat of a metal slide baking in the intense July sun? You'd stand at the top, contemplating the descent, knowing full well that the backs of your bare legs were about to be scorched. But you went down anyway because it was a rite of passage. And we can't forget the merry-go-round, a heavy iron spinning wheel of death that older kids would push until the centrifugal force practically launched the smaller children into the stratosphere. There were no safety nets. If you fell off the monkey bars, you landed squarely on unforgiving gravel. If you didn't leave the park with a red, stinging scrape on your knee and the distinct medicinal smell of mercurochrome or Bactine wafting from your skin later that night, you simply hadn't played hard enough. We learned about gravity and physics the hard way, and it made us tough as nails. Number 5. The 10-foot tether and phone etiquette. Before everyone had a supercomputer in their pocket, the household landline was the central nervous system of the family home. There was usually only one phone, prominently mounted on the kitchen wall in a shade of avocado green or mustard yellow. Because the phone was centrally located, the concept of a private phone call was a logistical nightmare. If you were a teenager trying to talk to your crush, it required tactical espionage. Remember grabbing that heavy receiver and stretching the tangled, coiled cord as absolutely far as it would physically go? You'd stretch it around the refrigerator, down the hallway, and cram yourself into the coat closet just to get a sliver of privacy. You'd sit there in the dark amongst the winter coats, whispering into the receiver, all while your mother was stirring the gravy on the stove just 3 feet away, pretending not to listen. And if you had a party line, you had to contend with the neighbors picking up and listening in. It taught us patience, brevity, and a very specific kind of telephone etiquette that is completely lost today. When you called a friend, you had to speak to their parents first, and you learned very quickly how to be polite and respectful. Number 6. Muscle bikes and the absolute no-helmet rule. Bicycles in the 1960s were not just toys, they were our primary mode of transit and our ultimate freedom machines. And the undisputed king of the cul-de-sac was the muscle bike, specifically the iconic Schwinn Stingray. But if you look at the photos from that era, you'll notice a glaring absence. Not a single bicycle helmet in sight. Helmets were virtually non-existent for kids. We rode with the wind literally in our hair. Remember the feeling of popping a massive wheelie on that glittery banana seat, holding onto those tall ape-hanger handlebars? We were performing neighborhood stunts that would make a modern pediatrician faint. We built rickety ramps out of stolen cinder blocks and warped plywood, launching ourselves into the air with zero protective gear. If you wiped out, you got up, dusted off the road rash, bent your fender back into place, and kept riding. The bike was an extension of our bodies, and the neighborhood was our raceway. I have to ask, what kind of bike did you ride back in the day? Did you have the coveted banana seat with the plastic streamers? Or were you stuck with a heavy hand-me-down cruiser from your older sibling? Drop the make and model of your first set of wheels in the comments. Number 7. The boredom mandate. Today we go to extraordinary lengths to ensure children are constantly entertained, educated, and stimulated by screens and scheduled activities. But in the 60s, "I'm bored" was a dangerous phrase to utter in front of your mother. If you made the mistake of complaining about boredom, you were immediately met with the classic threat: "Go find something to do, or I'll give you something to do." And you knew exactly what that meant. It meant pulling weeds in the blazing sun, dusting the baseboards, or washing the windows. So you fled. You ran outside and you figured it out. That mandated boredom was the absolute catalyst for the most profound, inventive play of our lives. Remember when a discarded refrigerator box from the appliance store became a NASA spaceship for 3 entire days? Or how you could spend 4 hours just watching a line of ants march across the hot sidewalk, eventually building them a little city out of twigs and pebbles. We had to create our own magic. We had to use our minds to bend reality because there was no screen to do the imagining for us. Number 8. The library pilgrimage and manual research. We live in an era where the entirety of human knowledge is accessible in our pockets in milliseconds. But in our childhood, information wasn't instant. It was a physical destination. If you had a school project on the Roman Empire or the solar system, you had to make a physical pilgrimage to the local library. Do you remember the specific, comforting smell of the library? It was an intoxicating blend of old paper, binding glue, and institutional floor wax. You had to navigate the wooden drawers of the card catalog, cross-referencing authors and subjects, and then hunt through the stacks using the Dewey Decimal System. And if you were lucky enough to have a set of the Encyclopedia Britannica or the World Book at home, you know they were treated like sacred texts. You'd pull down the heavy S volume, lay on the living room rug, and carefully turn the pages. If the library was closed, or if the book you needed was checked out, your questions simply stayed unanswered. We learned how to be patient, how to dig for truth, and how to respect the physical weight of knowledge. Number 9. Handwritten patience and the art of the pen pal. Long-distance communication in the 1960s was an ultimate exercise in delayed gratification. Before emails and instant text messages, maintaining a relationship with a distant relative or a summer camp friend required genuine physical effort. Remember the absolute thrill of walking to the end of the driveway, opening the metal mailbox, and seeing a stamped envelope with your name handwritten on the front? It felt like receiving a treasure. You'd carefully tear open the flap, taking in the scent of the paper, and read the cursive handwriting of your cousin or your designated pen pal. You would learn their personality through the slant of their letters and the doodles in the margins. And then you had to sit down at the kitchen table, focus your mind, and write back. You'd tell them about your week, fold the paper, lick the glue on the envelope, we all remember that distinct, terrible taste, and put it in the post. It would take days to arrive and weeks to get a response. That anticipation made the connection feel incredibly valuable. We didn't just communicate, we crafted letters. Number 10. The invisible line of shared bedrooms. In the post-war boom of the 60s, families were larger, and the square footage of the average American home was much smaller. Having your own private bedroom was a luxury reserved for only children or the incredibly wealthy. For the rest of us, sharing a room with a brother or sister was a mandatory lesson in diplomacy, negotiation, and territorial warfare. Do you remember the invisible line? Sometimes it wasn't invisible at all. It was a literal strip of masking tape drawn precisely down the center of the linoleum or the braided rug. If your sibling's foot, or even a single stray toy, crossed that line into your territory, it was considered a blatant act of war. But sharing a room also taught us profound lessons. You learned to sleep through your brother's snoring. You learned how to compromise on when the lights went out. And most importantly, you shared every deep, dark secret, while staring up at the ceiling in the pitch black. The shared bedroom was the proving ground for learning how to live with other human beings. I want to know about your childhood turf wars. Did you share a room with a sibling? Did you ever actually resort to putting tape down the middle of the floor to mark your territory? Tell us your funniest, most chaotic shared room stories down in the comments. Number 11. Conflict resolution and working it out yourselves. If there was a disagreement in the neighborhood, whether it was a dispute over the rules of kick the can, or a heated argument over whether a runner was safe or out at home plate, adults almost never stepped in to mediate. If you ran crying to your mother because Johnny wouldn't share the ball, her response was almost always, "Work it out yourselves, or you're all coming inside." And nobody wanted to go inside. So we learned the high-stakes art of playground negotiation. We learned to haggle. We learned how to read body language, how to stand our ground when we were right, and how to yield when we were wrong. We invented the sacred concept of the do-over, a magical mulligan that instantly erased the conflict and allowed the game to continue. We didn't need a parent, a teacher, or a referee to solve our problems. We learned that the ultimate goal was keeping the game alive, and that required compromise. It was a masterclass in social intelligence that modern, adult-refereed playdates simply cannot replicate. Number 12. The latchkey responsibility. The 1960s saw a rise in the latchkey kid. As societal norms shifted, many children became the original self-starters. We didn't have after-school care programs or nannies. When the yellow school bus dropped us off at 3:15 p.m., we were on our own. Do you remember the physical weight of that heavy metal house key hanging around your neck on a piece of yarn or a dirty shoelace tucked safely under your shirt? It wasn't just a piece of metal, it was a badge of immense trust. You would walk up to the empty house, turn the lock, and step into the profound, echoing quiet of the living room. You were the master of the castle. You managed your own snacks, usually a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or some saltines, and you knew you had to start your homework before your parents walked through the door at 5:30. There was no adult to nag you. You were trusted to follow the rules of the house even when no one was watching. It instilled a deep, unwavering sense of self-reliance and responsibility that became the defining characteristic of our generation. Number 13. Scheduled TV and the community ritual. Finally, we have the way we consumed entertainment. In the 1960s, television was absolutely not on demand. It was a rigid, highly anticipated community ritual. There were 3 main networks, and if the wind was blowing in the right direction, you might pick up a fuzzy UHF channel by adjusting the rabbit ears wrapped in tin foil. If you missed the Saturday morning cartoon lineup, or the once-a-year annual airing of The Wizard of Oz or A Charlie Brown Christmas, you didn't just click a button to stream it later. You had to wait an entire calendar year for it to come back around. Remember the whole family dropping whatever they were doing to huddle around the TV at exactly 8 p.m.? It wasn't just passive watching, it was a shared event. And on Monday morning, the entire schoolyard and the office water cooler would be buzzing with discussions about what happened on The Ed Sullivan Show or Bonanza. We were culturally connected because we all experienced the same stories at the exact same time. What was the one TV special or show you waited for all week or all year long? Was it The Grinch, a classic Western, or maybe a sci-fi adventure? Tell us in the comments, and let's see which show truly ruled the 60s. When we look back at these 13 rules from the vantage point of today, it's easy to see how they might seem overly strict, unstructured, or even a little dangerous by modern standards. But the truth is, those rules gave us something that is incredibly hard to find in today's hyper-curated world. They gave us the gift of true resilience. Because we weren't tracked, we learned how to get lost, and more importantly, how to find our way back home. Because we weren't constantly entertained, we learned how to be profoundly bored, and from that boredom, we found our own magic. We learned that a scraped knee wasn't a catastrophe, but a lesson. If these memories brought a smile to your face, or perhaps a nostalgic tear to your eye, please give this video a like. It helps our community grow. Subscribe to our channel as we continue to explore and celebrate the beautiful analog history of our lives. And please share this video with your siblings, your cousins, or your childhood best friend. See how many of these rules they still vividly remember.